Chef Mark, tip of the day. I want to talk about breaking down large portions of meat. You know, you go to the grocery store and usually your steaks are broken down for you already into portions and the fat's removed. But every once in a while, maybe you're having a big barbecue, you want to save a few bucks, you can find a big piece of meat. If you know what you're doing, you can really fabricate it down and get a lot of yield. So this is a New York Strip Loin. You got to make sure that you recognize which side has the nerve end, which is this piece right here. This is a big fat nerve end. A lot of times it only runs up to this part. And when you're cutting a New York Strip Loin, about at this point of the strip, you'll find that you'll start to get into that chewy nerve end. You can do two things with that. You can save that for well-done steaks. You can break it down into tips for stew meat. A lot of times it grills up really nice for steak salad, but it's not waste. The other tools I have, boning knife. I prefer a flexible boning knife for this. I've also got a scale for portioning and a large chef's knife for when I go to portion out the steaks. So what I'm going to do is make sure my knife's good and sharp. I'm going to start on the non-nerve end side of the strip. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this very chewy and really unpleasant piece of connective tissue, tendon. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it is unpleasant. I kind of call it the strip of the strip loin. That might not be entirely accurate, but certainly is a good description. And it's lots of sinew. It's tough. You can pull on this really. You can put a team of horses on one side, another team of horses on the other side, and have them run in opposite directions. And you know what? They're not going to bust through that. Some chefs I know prefer to try to remove this in one piece. Me, I will go through and remove it a little bit at a time. Reason being, I feel that I get less waste. Anytime I have edible meat that's stuck to the piece of fat there, that's something that I would count as waste, and I want to be careful to waste as little as possible. You can see, I'm going to remove this little piece right here. I'm going to start in the middle for tension, so pull back with my left hand here. I'm going to go to the right and then flip over and do opposite tension. And that's how I can get really accurate amounts of fat off without wasting too much. Okay, I'm trying to be nice and smooth here. Right. There we go. A little bit more right down here. I think that's going to do a nice job of just cleaning that up. Okay, a little bit more up here. Again, you can leave that on, but I really wouldn't recommend it. The next thing I like to do is flip it over. And you can see in here there's quite a bit of connective tissue and fat, big chunks of fat. Whenever I got this kind of low-hanging fruit fat, that's what I call it, where it's just basically 90-100% fat, and it's going to just kind of fatten up your steak. And what will end up happening is, if you don't do that, let's say we're going to cut 10-ounce strip steaks, if you don't remove that excess fat, you end up with a steak that's so darn thin, because it's so large, that it doesn't cook properly. And definitely on this back side, there's quite a bit of this connective tissue. Every once in a while, you might get a little piece of bone. If you come across some bone, you definitely want to remove that. And moving relatively quickly here. First couple times I did this, it was definitely a longer process than I'm making it seem right now. And again, same technique. Go in one direction, flip over, and then go in the other direction. Okay? Go in one direction, flip over, other direction. I'm going to do that again here. And I'll show you a little trick right here. Sometimes you get, flip this up so you can see this really big, deep kind of vein of fat connective tissue. It's really tough. You've got to remove that. So you can see the tip is that I'm moving around my work, or I'm moving my work. I'm not necessarily keeping things stationary. If I'm not getting a good vantage point when I'm butchering, I will either move myself or my work or both to make sure that I get a better angle at what I'm working at. So if you're working along and you find like, oh, that's too far of a stretch, just flip everything around. That's really going to help you out. Okay. I'm almost there, cleaning up the backside. And I like to do the backside, the underside first, because then I know it's done, and as I'm removing fat, similar method off the top, I don't have to worry about worrying about the fat that I can't see underneath. Okay, there's quite a bit of kind of fat here. Yeah, I'm losing a little bit of meat, but you know, it's not a large volume compared to the amount of steaks I'm going to get out, so I'm not that worried about it. Okay, and a little bit more here, a little fat. Okay. Okay, so quite a difference there. You can see there's quite a big fat band right here still. That'll probably come off as I'm working on the top side. Okay, so top side, you see these big chunks of fat that just kind of want to come off naturally and with very little work. I just go ahead and remove those first thing. Now you kind of have to estimate at this point how fat the fat cap is. Remember, over here is where my nerve end is, so I'm going to start on my non-nerve end. I'm going to start removing some of that fat. It's pretty thick when I'm removing there. You could, again, leave this on and count it towards the weight of the steak, but the steak ends up being so darn thin that it doesn't cook right. And you certainly can remove too much fat. If you don't have any fat cap at all, you end up with a steak that loses a little flavor and can be too lean. Okay, so I just cut that big piece of fat off on this side. Maybe I'll turn so you can see what I'm doing a little better here, right? And you see, I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way, so if my knife does slip, it's going to slip past me and not cut myself. Definitely want to be careful about knife slips. And the one way I prevent knife slips, you know, I will oftentimes, although putting my finger up here is incorrect with a chef's knife, on a boning knife it's nice because it locks your wrist out. And the other thing is I put downward pressure as I'm working, straight down. What that does is help maintain nice pressure on the knife as I'm working, and I'm less likely to have a knife slip on me and cut myself. Okay, so I'm just kind of filleting. I'm pressing down and working across here, removing small amounts of fat at a time. Again, you can't add back. You can only take away at this point, so just want to be careful. Okay, and you don't remove too much. I can see right there I've got quite a bit of meat sticking out, so I don't want to obviously remove any more from there because it's down to the fat, but nor do I want the entire thing looking like that. Okay, we're almost ready to start portioning steaks. Okay, getting there. And right now the nerve end is facing me, and I'm working away from the nerve end. You'll see sometimes I work away from me, other times I'm working towards me. Doesn't really matter. There's no right or wrong on that. Again, I'm changing the way I work depending on kind of where the angle of attack that I'm coming at from. Okay, so I'm now ready, well, nearly ready to start cutting steaks. I'm looking for a 10-ounce New York strip steak, and this is where the only way you can learn how to do this is by doing it, experience. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is this very first steak is oftentimes the trickiest steak to cut because this side of the strip comes out at an angle. So if I cut straight up and down, I end up with a steak that's a little bit wedge-shaped. So this one isn't bad, but I will sometimes make a little bit of a sacrificial cut if I have a big bulb of meat sticking out, and I will trim that down a little bit and save that for tips or for stew meat. Okay. So then I'm going to estimate what a 10-ounce steak looks like. What I'm going to do is set my knife here, kind of mark the fat, make sure that my knife is even. I don't want to be this way or this way, nor do I want to have my knife tilted in either direction. So I'm going to be completely vertical and kind of in relation with the rest of the steak. And then I'm just going to say a little good luck prayer. And I'm going to cut straight up and down. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully that's 10 ounces. Turn on my trusty scale rather over here. Okay, 11 ounces. All right. So it's a little bit on the big side. Okay. So that's okay because I have some additional fat here that I can cut off. I can make it down to 10 ounces. I'm not going to trim this one down because I'm serving this, you know, for myself, so I don't have to worry about that. But if I was in a restaurant, I certainly would go to the extra trouble to remove a little bit of extra fat there. So this is an 11-ounce steak. So now that I know that that's a little bit too fat, what I do when I cut the next one is make it a little bit thinner, and I just mean just a sliver thinner. It doesn't have to be a huge adjustment. Okay, onto the scale, 10 ounces on the dot, beautiful. And then as I'm working down the steak, if the strip steak starts to get more narrow, I do have to cut it a little bit deeper in profile. If it gets a little fatter, I might need to cut it a little thinner. So that's kind of how you portion steaks. Again, when I get down to the nerve end, well, what you'll see is that nerve will run through. And I'll show you an additional video how to go ahead and clean that up. In the meantime, Chef Mark, tip of the day.